have all the blocks for my funky windmill ready to assemble, and I'd like you to take a minute to just look at the blocks. I'm assembling funky windmill blocks that have already been quilted. These blocks go right next to each other and they're unsashed. Before we start going over the how to join the blocks together, I thought I'd show you what the blocks look like once they've been joined together. If you take a look at the front side of the two blocks that I've already joined, you'll notice that you can't see any traces of where these blocks have been joined. And now if you take a look at the back side of the blocks, you'll see what appears to be a tidy row of top stitching that falls about 1/8 of an inch from the fold that forms the edge of the backing. I've already trimmed all of my completed blocks to 1/2 of an inch beyond the stitched cutting guide. I had regular thread in my bobbin and water-soluble thread in my needle when I stitched my cutting guides so that the guides would be easy to remove once my blocks were trimmed. I've applied a bit of steam to the front of my blocks and you can see how easily the bobbin thread separates out. With my cutting guides removed, it's very easy to just flip the batting and the backing forward for the front block and backwards for the back block so that I have an easy access to stitch my seam. When I stitch my seam, I'll first stitch it at 1/2 of an inch and then trim to 1/4 of an inch. I finished stitching my seam and I trimmed my seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch, and then I pressed my seam allowance to one side. When I'm pressing my seam allowances, I like to change the direction I press for each alternate row. This makes aligning the seams much easier when it's time to join your rows. Next, I'm going to use my scissors and I'm going to remove the seam allowance from my batting and my stabilizer by cutting right along this stitched guide. I finished trimming the batting and the stabilizer from one block, and now I'm going to trim from the other side by just taking the scissors and cutting right along this stitched line. With my seam allowances removed, it's time to press the batting flat, and notice that the two edges of my batting are fairly close to each other. My batting's been securely stitched in place, so I don't have to worry about it shifting, but I do want to avoid any valleys from forming where the two pieces of batting come together. And I use heat press batting together to keep my batting edges smooth and secure. Heat press batting together comes in 1.5 inch rolls. For this application, I cut a strip the size that I need and then cut the strip in half and use a 3/4 of an inch strip to cover the join between the two pieces of batting. And then I press it so that the adhesive forms a permanent bond. And when you're working with the heat and press batting together, the top side is very smooth and the back side that has the adhesive on it is rather bumpy, so it's easy to tell the two sides apart. I'm going to flip one side of my backing forward so that it covers the batting, and I'm going to give it a good press so that all the layers are smooth and wrinkle free. I'm going to take the remaining backing and I'm going to fold it forward over the whole assembly, and I'm going to press it flat as well. I have an acrylic ruler that's set up as my 3/8 of an inch jig, and I'm going to slide it into position along the unfinished edge of my backing. The jig stops the fabric precisely at 3/8 of an inch. I have a chisel tip on my Easy Fold pen, and I'm going to use the pen to draw a line right along the ruler's edge. Next, I'll remove my ruler and I'll turn down the edge of my backing. And since I tested my jig when I made it, I know that my fabric is going to fold precisely at 3/8 of an inch. And then I'll press the fabric to set the crease. I have my stainless steel flow restrictor on my glue bottle, and this is going to allow me to run a very light bead of glue along the inside of my backing edge. And once I finish this, I will just press the edge to set the glue. And all I'm doing is creating a temporary bond that I know isn't going to move. The last thing that I need to do to join my blocks is stitch in the ditch. Before you get ready to try this, I suggest that you calibrate your stitch in the ditch foot to your needle. My stitch in the ditch foot has a little hole right in the center. It's really for a straight stitch. But even with that tiny hole, I can still move my needle to the left or to the right. And what I found with my own foot is that I need to move 2 full clicks to the right if I want my stitches to fall inside the seam line. And one more look at the 2 blocks that have been joined, just to remember that what you're going for is this 1/8 of an inch seam that's only visible on the back.